In 1978, a 15-year-old kid walked up to a gym wall in Wilmington, North Carolina, looking for his name on a list. It wasn't there. His varsity basketball coach had cut him. Now, you've probably heard that story before. Everybody has. It's basketball's most famous cliché. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Getting cut isn't what made Michael Jordan the greatest player who ever lived. What happened inside his head afterward is the part they leave out. And it's darker and stranger and more useful to you than the inspirational poster version. Because in 2026, 31 years after his last championship, Michael Jordan is $4.3 billion richer than he was a few months ago. He's suing an entire sports league, and a stadium full of strangers just held up a sign mocking him on live television. He didn't get soft. He never got soft. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that's terrifying. Stick around, because the twist in this story isn't about basketball at all. Here's a question psychologists have studied for decades. Why do some people respond to rejection by giving up, while others respond by becoming obsessive? Behavioral researchers point to something called the pain of loss effect. Humans feel the sting of losing something roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. It's one of the most repeated findings in decision science. Most people who feel that sting retreat. They protect themselves from it happening again. Jordan did the opposite. Those close to him have described a teenager who started waking up before dawn to practice alone, who treated every subsequent minor slight, a missed dunk contest win, a teammate's stray comment, a rival's trash talk, as if it were that same gym wall all over again. Sports psychologists have a term that fits this pattern: rejection sensitivity rechanneled into performance drive. The wound doesn't close, it gets weaponized. That's not a feel-good detail, that's a warning label. Because a mind that never lets an old wound heal doesn't know how to stop, even when the war is long over. Keep that in mind. We're coming back to it. By the time Jordan reached the Chicago Bulls in 1984, teammates weren't describing a nice guy. They were describing someone almost impossible to be around. Former teammates and coaches have talked for years about practices where Jordan would target the weakest player on the roster and go after him. Not to build him up, but to expose him, sometimes to the point of tears. Steve Kerr, who later became a championship-winning coach himself, has spoken publicly about getting into an actual physical altercation with Jordan in practice. Jordan punched him in the face over a hard foul. This is the part the highlight reels skip. The same intensity that produced 6 championships also produced a documented pattern of psychological cruelty toward the people standing closest to him. Why does this matter for the story? Because it's the clearest real-world case study of something researchers now call the burn rate of obsessive drive. The idea that the same trait that produces extraordinary achievement almost always produces collateral damage in relationships, in health, in the people who orbit that person. You cannot separate the 6 championships from the punch Steve Kerr took to the face. They came from the same source. Hold that thought, because it's about to twist. Here's what most videos about Jordan won't tell you, because it complicates the hero narrative. In the early 1990s, at the peak of his fame, Jordan's gambling became a genuine controversy. A book by a golf course owner alleged Jordan lost roughly $1.25 million over 3 years, and separately, Jordan was linked to a friend who was later found murdered, with gambling debts surfacing in news coverage at the time. The NBA quietly investigated. Jordan was never found to have violated any rule. But shortly after, in the middle of his prime, at the height of his powers, he retired from basketball entirely. Officially, it was about his father's murder that same year, and that grief was real and devastating. But here's the twist psychologists point to. The same obsessive, rejection-driven mind that can't stop pushing forward on a basketball court often can't stop pushing in other directions either. And gambling scratches an almost identical itch to competition. Risk, stakes, a scoreboard, a way to keep proving something to yourself. The gym wall from 1978 didn't just build a champion. Some researchers argue it built a person who structurally needed conflict and risk to feel normal. And when the game stopped supplying it, other outlets did. That's the twist. The greatest competitor of all time narrative and the man with a documented gambling problem narrative are the same story, told from two different rooms. Which brings us to right now. Michael Jordan is 63 years old. He does not need to compete anymore. He has nothing left to prove to anyone on earth. His net worth just climbed to $4.3 billion, making him the wealthiest former athlete alive. And yet, this year, he's in the middle of a bitter federal lawsuit as co-owner of NASCAR's 23XI Racing against NASCAR itself, accusing the league of monopolistic practices. He's not settling. He's not walking away. A man with more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes is fighting a legal war over racing regulations most fans can't even name. And just weeks ago, at the World Cup, a stadium full of fans from the country of Jordan held up a sign mocking his name, using the infamous "Crying Jordan" meme. And it went viral worldwide, millions of people laughing at him in real time. The old Michael Jordan would have burned that memory into fuel. The question the video's been building toward is this: does it ever end? Psychologists who study high achievers call this identity foreclosure, when your entire sense of self gets built so early and so completely around the person who never stops fighting that you literally do not have another mode to switch to. Retirement doesn't turn it off. Billions of dollars don't turn it off. Even irrelevance to an entire sport doesn't turn it off. That gym wall in 1978 is still, in a very real sense, running Michael Jordan's life in 2026. So here's the uncomfortable truth this story is actually about. And it's not about basketball at all. The trait that makes someone unstoppable and the trait that makes someone impossible to live with are, very often, the exact same trait. Jordan's story is the cleanest real-world proof of that most of us will ever see. 6 championships, 1 punch to Steve Kerr's face, $4.3 billion, 1 gambling scandal, a legend at 63 who still can't stop fighting a race car league most Americans don't follow. You don't get to keep the fire and lose the burn scars. That's not how it works. Not for Michael Jordan, and honestly, not for anyone. So here's the real question I want you to sit with. Is there a gym wall moment in your own life still quietly running the show, decades later, without you even noticing? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if this kind of deep dive into the psychology behind legendary figures is your thing, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of story I'm doing next.